The council chamber on the planet Zithra Prime was vast. Towering windows looked out onto swirling gas storms, colored in shades of violet and green, and the distant shimmer of distant stars. Dozens of alien delegates filled the room, tall, thin beings with elongated limbs, armored creatures with crystalline skin, and luminous forms that pulsed like living lights. Yet, as the doors opened to announce the next speaker, a hush fell across the chamber. Even the most arrogant members who were used to arguing and intimidating fell silent. The name spoken was enough to stop conversation, to freeze limbs, and to sharpen eyes with unease. The human warrior. Lyra, a young envoy from the aquatic world of Virlia, felt her hands tremble as she adjusted the data scroll in her grasp. She had studied humans for years. She knew their anatomy, their weak physiology, and their relatively short lifespans. Compared to her species, a human barely lived long enough to finish schooling. They were soft, fragile, emotional. Yet every time the name was mentioned in council reports, the tone changed. The word human alone carried no weight, but human warrior, that was different. That commanded attention, respect, and a hint of terror. Lyra glanced around. Some of the older delegates, beings who had faced countless wars and witnessed galaxies fall into ruin, avoided eye contact. Their bodies stiffened. Others whispered in low tones, carefully choosing their words. The human warrior was a single individual, yet his reputation had spread across star systems. She shivered, not from fear but from curiosity. The council had called an emergency session. No one knew why exactly, but intelligence reports suggested that a human would soon arrive as an envoy. Not a fleet, not an army, just one human, and that human had already caused unease without even stepping foot on Zithra Prime. Lyra tried to understand. How could a single being with the frail body of a human create such a stir across species that outnumbered humans by millions, with technology that could destroy planets? The council's leader, a crystalline entity named Xylo, rose from his throne. His body shimmered as he spoke, and his voice carried like a bell through the chamber. "We are gathered here," he began, "because of reports from the Andara system. There has been an unusual occurrence involving a human." A murmur ran through the room. A few delegates scoffed, but no one dared laugh. "Reports indicate," Xylo continued, "that this human confronted two opposing fleets and resolved a potential conflict without using violence. No battles were fought, yet the fleets retreated and the situation was resolved." Lyra's eyes widened. She had read the report. She remembered the diagrams showing two massive fleets, each capable of destroying the other in minutes, yet both had withdrawn because of one human. "How?" Xylo's voice echoed in the chamber. "We must prepare. This human will arrive soon, and we must understand his intentions. It is our duty to ensure the safety of Zithra Prime and, if necessary, negotiate peace." Lyra left the council chamber feeling unsettled. She walked through the wide corridors of the space station, past alien merchants, soldiers, and diplomats. Everywhere she went, she could hear whispers of the same name. The human warrior. Humans were clever, yes, and adaptable, but feared to this extent. It seemed impossible. Lyra remembered the words of her mentor, an elderly Virlian scholar. "It is in their minds, their hearts, and their unyielding will." She had always dismissed this as poetic nonsense. Now, facing the reality of a single human creating galactic ripples, she began to wonder if there was truth in it. Days passed, and the human's arrival was imminent. The station was abuzz with preparation. Security measures were heightened, not because anyone expected the human to attack, but because no one could predict what a human warrior might do. Lyra spent long hours in the observation chambers, scanning incoming ships. Finally, a sleek vessel approached the station. Unlike the massive warships she had expected, the human ship was simple, unassuming. It was fast, agile, and elegant. No weapons protruded from its hull. No defensive shields glowed around it. It moved like it belonged with quiet confidence. When the docking bay doors opened, the human emerged. Lyra had imagined a towering warrior with armor forged from alien metals. Instead, she saw a man of average height. His hair was dark, his eyes calm and observant, and his posture unshakable. He walked slowly, deliberately. His hands were empty. He wore a simple uniform devoid of insignias or weapons. Yet the moment he stepped into the bay, every alien there felt it. The air shifted. Conversations died. Even the robotic assistants paused in their programmed motions. Lyra's pulse quickened. She followed him at a distance, observing how he moved through crowds. He didn't push, didn't demand space, didn't threaten. And yet all around him, beings stepped aside. It wasn't fear of violence, it was respect. Uneasy, instinctive respect. That evening, the council held a closed session to discuss the human. Lyra was present, seated quietly in the observation gallery. "They say he talks to leaders as equals," one delegate said. "He doesn't bow. He doesn't threaten, and yet we listen." "And what happens if he disagrees?" asked another, a tall alien whose skin changed color with emotion. The first delegate's voice lowered. "Then we obey. We cannot fight him, not alone, not with armies, not even with technology." Lyra's mind raced. What kind of being could wield influence without force? She thought of humans back on Earth, their fragile planet, their wars, their moments of desperation. How had one human, one person, earned such power across the stars? That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She walked along the observation deck, staring out at the galaxy. Stars twinkled like distant fires, and she thought about what it meant to be human. The reports had called them fragile, emotional, easily broken. Yet here she was, watching a human walk calmly through a station filled with beings who could obliterate planets and feel awe, fear, respect. She wondered what the human thought as he walked past these aliens. Did he feel superior? Did he feel afraid? Or did he simply move forward, guided by some inner principle that the rest of the galaxy didn't understand? The answer would soon come. The human warrior was no longer a distant legend. He had arrived. And the galaxy would watch carefully as a single human, small, fragile, ordinary, changed the course of events simply by being himself. The following morning, Lyra was assigned to greet the human. Her heart raced, her thoughts scattered, but she maintained her composure. The docking bay doors opened again. The human stepped out into the sunlight of Zithra Prime. He didn't look around. He didn't announce himself. He simply walked, calm and confident, toward the awaiting council chamber. Lyra caught up to him just outside the doors. She hesitated, unsure of what to say. Finally, she managed a quiet greeting. "Welcome to Zithra Prime," she said. The human paused, turning to look at her. His gaze was steady, neither intimidating nor condescending. It was simply observing. "Thank you," he replied, his voice calm and even. "I am here to listen and to understand." Lyra felt a strange sensation, a mixture of relief and awe. Here was the legendary human warrior. He carried no weapons. He radiated no aggression. Yet somehow, she knew that if he chose to act, his decisions would shape the galaxy. And she trembled, not from fear of him, but from the weight of his presence, the promise of what humanity could be, and the mystery of the human spirit. By the time they reached the council chamber, word had spread: the human was here. Delegates turned to watch as he entered, alone, unarmed, yet commanding attention. Whispers filled the room. Some spoke of hope, some spoke of caution, but all felt the same truth. This was not just a human. This was a force of will. This was a being who reminded the galaxy why humans were not to be underestimated. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Lyra realized it. The legend was real. The human warrior was not merely a story. He was coming to change everything. The council chamber doors closed behind him. Silence fell, and the galaxy waited, holding its breath, for the first move of a human unlike any other. The council chamber of Zithra Prime was quiet. The enormous windows showed a swirling sky of violet storms, but inside, the tension was thicker than any storm outside. Delegates from hundreds of star systems watched the human warrior. He was alone, unarmed, and moving slowly, deliberately, like a calm river flowing through the chaos of alien power and suspicion. Lyra followed him from a distance. She had been assigned as his observer, but she found herself more fascinated than she expected. Every step he took seemed to command the attention of the room, and yet he did nothing to demand it. No weapon flashed, no display of power. He simply existed, and that existence made everyone uneasy. The human warrior's first words were soft, almost unnoticeable. He did not shout or threaten. He did not demand respect. He spoke slowly, carefully, and in a tone that made everyone lean in to hear. "I am here to understand," he said, his eyes scanning the chamber. "Not to fight, not to conquer. I wish only to speak." A ripple of whispers ran through the delegates. Some scoffed, calling him naive. Some laughed quietly, thinking a human could not survive such a council without armor or weapons. Others simply stared, unsure of what to make of him. Lyra noticed a change in the room. The larger, more powerful beings began to shrink back, not in fear of attack but in uncertainty. They did not know how to react to a human who ignored intimidation. His calmness unsettled them. It was unlike anything they had faced before. The council leader, Xylo, finally spoke. His crystalline voice echoed in the chamber. "You say you wish to speak, and yet humans are small, frail. Your planet cannot defend itself against the threats of the galaxy. Why should we listen to you?" The human warrior's eyes met Xylo's. There was no anger, no arrogance. Only clarity and patience. "Because," he said, "when humans face threats, we do not rely on size or technology alone. We rely on reason, on endurance, and on understanding. We face what comes and we find solutions that others cannot see." Murmurs ran through the room. A few delegates whispered to one another. Some leaned forward. The idea that one human could influence entire fleets without weapons sounded impossible. Yet here he was, proving it true simply by existing in the room. Lyra felt a strange stirring in her chest. She had studied humans for years, yet she had never seen one like this. Others spoke of human resilience, but it was usually stories of war, survival, or intelligence. She had never imagined calm courage as a weapon, and now she was witnessing it firsthand. The human warrior began to walk slowly among the delegates, making eye contact with each species. He did not avoid anyone, and he did not look down on anyone. He simply acknowledged them. A towering alien with jagged, metallic skin tried to intimidate him. Its eyes glowed red. Its voice thundered across the chamber. "You cannot walk here as though you belong," it shouted. The human warrior did not flinch. He paused, looked at the alien calmly, and spoke softly. "I do not seek to belong. I seek only to speak. If you wish to remain hostile, that is your choice. But know this, conflict harms everyone. It benefits none." The alien's glowing eyes narrowed. It expected fear. It expected submission. Instead, it felt confused. No one had ever spoken to it like this. The calm certainty of the human disrupted its instincts. It did not attack. It did not retreat. It simply stood, unsure what to do. Over the next hours, the human warrior met with individual delegates, learning about their cultures, their fears, and their ambitions. He listened more than he spoke, yet every word he did speak carried weight. He asked questions that made even the most experienced diplomats pause. "What do you truly fear?" he asked one elder from a gas-based species. "What matters most to you?" he asked a counselor from a crystalline world. His words were simple, but the effect was profound. Aliens who had spent centuries defending, conquering, or scheming suddenly found themselves examining their own motives. They did not see a small human. They saw clarity, reason, and a mind free from pride or greed. Lyra watched closely. She began to understand why the human warrior was feared, not because he could destroy, but because he could see truth. He could challenge assumptions without raising a voice. He could make powerful beings question themselves, and in doing so, he reshaped the balance of power without a single threat. As the day turned to night, a crisis unfolded nearby. Two alien fleets, each from rival systems, began maneuvering dangerously close to Zithra Prime. Their conflict could have triggered a war that engulfed the station. The human warrior stepped forward. He did not call for weapons. He did not raise alarms. Instead, he approached the fleet commanders through their communication channels. His voice was calm, steady, and full of certainty. "You have two choices," he said. "Continue as you are and the consequences will be catastrophic. Or you can stop and consider what truly matters, your people, your homes, and your futures. I am not here to fight. I am here to reason. Listen carefully." Hours passed. Delegates watched as the fleets adjusted their positions, hesitated, and finally withdrew. No one fired a shot. No one raised a weapon. Yet the human warrior had prevented disaster. Lyra could hardly believe it. One human, with no armies, no ships, and no technology, had changed the course of events simply by speaking, and by being calm in the presence of danger. Later, in the quiet of the observation deck, Lyra approached him. You just stopped a war," she said softly. The human warrior smiled faintly. "I did not stop it. They stopped themselves. I only reminded them of the cost of their actions." "But why are they afraid of you?" she asked. He paused, looking out at the swirling storms outside. "Not afraid of me," he said. "Afraid of what humans can become when they decide they must act. We do not fight for power. We fight to protect. And when all else fails, we endure." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. It was not fear of violence, but awe of restraint. She had never imagined courage could be so quiet, so deliberate, and so powerful. The next day, the human warrior met with the council again. This time, he sat quietly while delegates debated and argued. He did not interrupt. He did not assert dominance. Instead, he waited until they had exhausted their own arguments. Then he spoke, calmly and clearly. "You seek peace. You desire stability. You worry about power. Yet you do not see that your fear itself is what drives conflict. If you listen to each other, if you understand each other, there is no need for war." It was a simple message, yet it resonated through the chamber. Delegates who had come to Zithra Prime with suspicion, even hatred, began to question their motives. Some nodded, some whispered. All listened. Lyra noticed something extraordinary. The human warrior did not command respect by force. He commanded it by clarity, reason, and humanity. It was the essence of HFY. Humans were fragile in body, yet indomitable in mind and spirit. That evening, the council called a vote. A decision was needed to prevent the rival fleets from returning. Normally, the vote would have been contentious, with threats and ultimatums. But this time, it was unanimous. All delegates agreed to a temporary truce, to negotiate openly, and to consider the human warrior's words. No one questioned his guidance. No one opposed him. Lyra could hardly believe it. A single human had changed the behavior of hundreds of alien leaders, without a weapon, without a threat, without a single show of power. As the human warrior left the chamber, Lyra followed. She asked quietly, "Do you ever tire of this, always being watched, always being feared?" He looked at her with calm eyes. "Fear is not the point. Understanding is. And if I can help others see the truth without force, then every step is worth it." Lyra felt a deep respect, a new understanding of humanity. These humans were not simply survivors. They were thinkers, protectors, and innovators. They were beings who could walk alone among predators and yet emerge unharmed, because their strength came from their mind, their heart, and their unwavering will. The human warrior's presence on Zithra Prime became a legend in its own time. Stories spread quickly. The human who walked unarmed through a council of hundreds, the human who prevented war with words alone, the human who faced fleets and convinced them to pause, reconsider, and retreat. And through it all, Lyra realized something remarkable. Humans were not feared for what they did. They were feared for what they represented, the potential of resilience, reason, and courage in the smallest, most unassuming body. The galaxy was watching, and Lyra knew one thing for certain. Humanity was no longer to be underestimated. The human warrior smiled faintly as he looked out at the stars, calm and composed. He had walked without fear. And that alone had changed the course of events. The human warrior's presence on Zithra Prime had settled into a quiet rhythm. Delegates no longer whispered behind closed doors. Instead, they observed him openly, curious and cautious. He did not seek attention, yet his every move inspired speculation, admiration, and unease. Lyra, as his assigned observer, had grown accustomed to walking alongside him. But what she saw now was more than legend. It was understanding in motion. The morning was calm. The violet storms beyond the windows had faded, leaving a galaxy glittering with distant suns. The council chamber filled slowly as delegates prepared for discussions about the rival fleets. The human warrior entered, calm as ever. No one approached him. No one interrupted his path. He moved as though he were part of the chamber itself, a quiet, solid presence. Lyra noticed delegates stealing glances, not of hostility but of curiosity. They seemed drawn to his presence, as if understanding him might unlock secrets about their own fears and ambitions. A young delegate, nervous and trembling, finally spoke up. "We have heard the stories, but tell us truly, why do you humans do what you do? How can one human prevent war without weapons, without fleets, without force?" The human warrior's gaze rested on her. There was no judgment, no pride, only quiet clarity. "Humans are not born strong," he said. "We do not have thick armor like some of your species, nor can we destroy planets with a single weapon. Our strength comes from another place, from survival, from experience, from choice." The room fell silent. Delegates leaned forward, curious. Even Xylo, the council leader, seemed unsettled by the calm authority in his voice. "Your fleets," he continued, "your technology, your weapons, they can destroy, yes, but they cannot teach understanding. Humans face dangers every day, not just from others, but from life itself. We learn to endure, to adapt, to protect what matters most. That is why we survive. That is why one human can stop fleets without firing a shot." Lyra felt her pulse quicken. She had studied humans, read their histories, and analyzed their weaknesses. But here, in front of her eyes, she realized the truth of their resilience. Humans did not fight because they wanted to dominate. They acted because they chose to endure, to protect, and to overcome. The human warrior paused, letting his words sink in. The silence in the chamber was not uncomfortable, it was thoughtful. Aliens who had spent centuries building power and strategy were hearing a perspective they had never considered. One of the older delegates, a towering being of shifting metal, spoke cautiously. "You speak of protection, yet your species is small, fragile. You cannot possibly influence large fleets or planets." The human warrior nodded slowly. "It is true, we are small, but we are not weak. And sometimes the smallest being can cause the largest change, not by force, but by determination, by standing firm when others doubt, by choosing what is right even when it is hard." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. The council chamber was filled with powerful beings, some of whom could crush planets with a gesture. Yet they listened. They felt the weight of his words, and they were not afraid of what he could do. They were afraid of what humanity represents. Later, in a quiet observation corridor, Lyra walked beside him. She asked softly, "Why do they fear humans? Is it because of your power?" He shook his head. "No, they fear us because we choose to act when others might hesitate. We do not seek power for its own sake. We act for what must be done. And when that moment comes, we endure. That endurance, our willingness to face consequences, to protect, to survive, is something others cannot always understand." Lyra was silent. She realized then that fear of humans was not about aggression. It was about unpredictability. Humans were not machines, nor were they easily controlled. They were guided by will, emotion, and principle, and that combination was alien to most species. The human warrior's next action was subtle, yet profound. He requested a private meeting with delegates from the rival fleets. Instead of approaching with threats or ultimatums, he simply walked among them. "You have a choice," he said, his voice calm and steady. "You may continue conflict, or you may consider the cost to your people. I do not command you. I only ask that you look honestly at your actions and the consequences they bring." For hours he spoke to leaders one by one, asking simple questions. By the end of the day, the fleets agreed to a temporary truce. The decision was unanimous. Delegates marveled not at his power, but at the effect of his reasoning, patience, and understanding. That night, Lyra walked with him along the observation deck. The stars glittered far below, and the galaxy stretched endlessly in every direction. "You did it again," she said softly. "You stopped potential war with words. How do you do it?" The human warrior looked at her, eyes calm yet penetrating. "Humans have always faced impossible odds. Our planet is small. Our lives are short. Danger is everywhere, but we endure. We learn. We act when necessary. Strength is not measured in power alone. It is measured in will, in perseverance, in the courage to do what is right even when the world doubts you." Lyra felt a deep respect, almost reverence. This was the human essence the galaxy feared, not because humans sought domination, but because humans could act decisively, endure endlessly, and protect fiercely. The next morning brought a new challenge. Delegates from multiple worlds demanded proof of the humans' intentions. They wanted guarantees that humans would not act deceptively or betray trust. The human warrior did not offer weapons, threats, or displays of force. Instead, he asked for dialogue. He spoke to each species individually, listening to their fears, their motivations, and their expectations. He acknowledged their concerns. He respected their sovereignty. Through patience, empathy, and clarity, he earned trust, not by commanding it but by demonstrating it. Lyra observed as leaders who had once doubted humans began to speak openly, ask questions, and even admit past mistakes. The human warrior had not merely prevented conflict. He had changed the way beings thought about cooperation, trust, and understanding. Later, in a private conversation, Lyra asked him a question she had long wondered. "Do humans ever fail? Are there times when your endurance isn't enough?" The human warrior's gaze softened. "Of course we fail. We are not perfect. We make mistakes, but failure does not define us. We learn, we rise, we try again. And sometimes, even when the odds seem impossible, we find a way to endure. That is what others fear. They see our potential, not our weakness. They see what we can become when we refuse to give up." Lyra felt the weight of his words. Humans were small, fragile, emotional, yet they had the power to change the galaxy, not through weapons but through will, determination, and courage. By midday, news arrived from distant fleets. Reports of past human interventions had reached far-off systems. Other leaders began to rethink strategies, considering dialogue over war. Human influence, it seemed, was subtle, enduring, and profound. Lyra realized then that the human warrior's power was not in his actions alone. It was in the example he set, the quiet demonstration that courage, clarity, and endurance could shape events more effectively than armies or weapons. That evening, the council gathered to reflect on the human's presence. Delegates spoke of curiosity, amazement, and cautious admiration. Some still doubted, others had been convinced. Lyra sat quietly watching him. The human warrior did not boast. He did not demand acknowledgement. He simply existed, demonstrating the truth of his species in the most subtle yet impactful way imaginable. "You make them listen," she said softly. "Without weapons, without threats. How can that be?" He smiled faintly. "Because humans act from understanding, not fear." We endure, we protect, we reason, and when necessary, we choose to face the impossible. That is why they fear us, not for what we have, but for what we represent. The night ended with a quiet realization. Humans were more than fragile creatures. They were beings capable of shaping events through clarity, courage, and unwavering principle. And the galaxy, filled with beings of immense power, was beginning to understand that fear of humans was not about aggression, but about potential, about resolve, and about a will that refused to break. As the stars shone across Zithra Prime, Lyra knew one thing for certain. The human warrior was not merely a visitor. He was a living example of humanity's greatest strength. And what came next would change the galaxy in ways that no one, not even the Council, could yet imagine. The galaxy had been watching. Every fleet, every council, every species aware of humans now focused on Zithra Prime. The human warrior had moved quietly, observed, and spoken with clarity, but his presence had ripples far beyond the station. Whispers of his deeds spread quickly. The human who walked unarmed through councils, the human who prevented war with words alone, the human who made fleets reconsider their actions, not through strength, but through resolve. Lyra, standing on the observation deck, watched him approach the council chamber one last time. The violet storms outside had settled into calm, the stars glimmering like distant eyes. She knew that today would be a turning point. Delegates filed into the chamber, some still skeptical, others cautious, and a few genuinely hopeful. The human warrior entered quietly, his calm presence immediately commanding attention. He did not raise his voice, nor did he gesture dramatically. He merely stood in the center, looking at the assembly with steady eyes. For the first time, the human warrior addressed the council as a whole. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of truth. "You have questioned humans," he said. "You have wondered why one small being can influence fleets, resolve conflicts, and shift the course of events. You have feared us. You have doubted us. Today, I will explain why humans are what they are, and why we are feared, respected, and sometimes misunderstood." He paused, letting the words sink in. The chamber was completely silent. Even the metallic delegates whose voices had once thundered across galaxies seemed to hold their breath. "Our strength," he continued, "is not in size, technology, or the ability to destroy. It is in endurance, in perseverance, in the willingness to act even when the odds are impossible. Humans learn quickly. We survive harsh environments, adapt to dangers, and protect what matters most, not because we are strong, but because we choose to be." Lyra noticed a murmur ripple through the room. Delegates leaned forward, intrigued. The human warrior did not raise his hands, did not display weapons, did not summon power. Yet his words carried more force than any fleet or weapon could. "When humans act," he said, "we do not do so lightly. We calculate, we consider, we endure. We know loss. We know suffering. We know fear. And we act anyway. That is why one human can stop fleets, prevent wars, and influence events across the galaxy. Not through violence, but through will." A tall alien from a crystalline world, whose species prided themselves on logic and technology, finally spoke. "You claim that your strength is in will alone, but will cannot stop fleets, cannot prevent wars. How do we know your claims are not mere words?" The human warrior smiled faintly. "Because actions follow words. We do what is necessary. Sometimes it is speaking clearly. Sometimes it is acting decisively. But always it is guided by principle, not fear. We endure. We protect. We choose." Lyra noticed that the delegates were no longer skeptical. They were listening, not to the words themselves, but to the truth behind them. The Council's emergency communication channels buzzed. The rival fleets, now stationed near Zithra Prime, requested a message. The human warrior did not hesitate. He addressed the leaders directly, his calm voice carrying across space. "You have an opportunity," he said, "to continue conflict and watch countless lives lost, or to step back, understand, and choose a path that protects your people. I do not demand compliance. I only ask that you consider the cost of your actions. Think beyond anger, beyond pride, beyond fear. Choose wisely. Hours passed. The fleets debated, reconsidered, and finally withdrew. Not because they were ordered to, not because they were threatened, but because the human warrior had shown them another way, clear, rational, and humane. Lyra, observing quietly, realized the magnitude of the moment. Humans were not warriors of destruction. They were warriors of thought, principle, and endurance. That alone made them more powerful than most species could understand. Later, the council reconvened. Delegates spoke openly, some with humility, others with admiration. They admitted mistakes, reconsidered old grudges, and began discussing cooperation rather than conflict. Lyra followed the human warrior as he moved among them. He did not command. He did not assert authority. He simply engaged, listened, and guided. A young delegate approached him nervously. Why do you do this?" she asked. "Why not fight like everyone expects?" The human warrior looked at her, calm and steady. "Because fighting is easy, acting wisely is hard, protecting others is harder still. Humans endure because we must, and when we act it is to preserve, not to destroy. That is why we are feared, not for what we do, but for what we represent." Lyra felt the truth of his words settle within her. She had seen fleets stopped, councils swayed, and alien leaders reconsider centuries of hostility, all without a single act of violence. Humans were small, fragile, and emotional, yes, but that fragility was also their strength. Their minds were sharp, their hearts unwavering, and their will unbreakable. Even the most powerful delegates realized it. Fear of humans was not fear of physical destruction. It was fear of a species that could act decisively, endure endlessly, and protect fiercely without seeking power. As the day wore on, a final challenge arose. An influential alien faction threatened to withdraw from the council, claiming that humans could not be trusted. The human warrior did not argue. He simply asked a question. "What do you want most?" he said. "Power, respect, revenge? Or do you want peace, understanding, and the chance to protect your people?" The question was simple, yet profound. The alien faction faltered. They realized that their pursuit of power had blinded them to the consequences of their actions. They agreed to remain, not because they were forced, but because they chose a wiser path. Lyra marveled at the scene. A single human had shifted the decisions of multiple factions, guided discussions of peace, and prevented conflict, all without raising a weapon. That evening, the human warrior walked to the observation deck, where Lyra joined him. Stars glittered across the galaxy, and the vastness of space seemed to echo the quiet strength of the human presence. "You've done it again," Lyra said. "You've changed the course of events without fighting. How is that possible?" He looked out at the stars, calm and unshaken. "Because humans act from principle, not fear. We endure hardships, learn from them, and protect what matters most. Strength is not measured in power alone, but in courage, wisdom, and will. That is why the galaxy fears humans, and why we survive when others would fail." Lyra nodded, understanding finally what legend had only hinted at. Humans were fragile in body, yes, but in mind, heart, and spirit they were unmatched. The human warrior returned to the council chamber one last time. Delegates watched him with a mixture of respect, awe, and cautious admiration. He did not boast, threaten, or demand attention. He simply spoke, clearly and calmly. "Conflict is not inevitable. Understanding is possible. Decisions have consequences. Humans endure not because we seek power, but because we choose to act when necessary. That choice is our strength." A silence followed. Then one by one, delegates nodded. Discussions began anew, this time guided by reason, empathy, and understanding. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. A human had changed the course of events not through force, but through clarity, courage, and principle. As the council dispersed, Lyra approached him one final time. "Do you ever tire of being feared?" she asked. He shook his head. "Fear is not the point, understanding is. When others see the truth of our endurance, the truth of our will, and the truth of our courage, they may fear. But they also learn. And that is the legacy we leave, not destruction, but possibility." The human warrior stepped onto his ship, preparing to leave Zithra Prime. Delegates and fleets watched silently. He did not raise weapons. He did not display strength. He simply left, calm and composed, a living example of humanity's resilience. Lyra stood on the observation deck, watching him disappear into the stars. She knew that this was only the beginning. Humans would continue to shape the galaxy, not through violence, but through endurance, courage, and wisdom. And the legend of the human warrior, who never raised a weapon but changed the course of history, would be remembered for generations. The galaxy had learned something profound. Humans were small, fragile, emotional. But their will, their courage, and their choice to endure made them unmatched. And that was the true power of the human warrior.